Haha, isn't it funny that I literally just said that I'm not gonna have a video out for a while? Isn't that hilarious? Something always comes up, doesn't it? And this time, it's that one day back in June I went on Twitter and the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, Scott Cawthon, was trending. Actually, I could tell you the exact day that happened because I was tweeting about it too. I'm not surprised about Scott Cawthon, but I am disappointed. Harsh words, Grace. Way to dig deep. So, what exactly did I find out on that fateful day of June 10th that made me so disappointed? Well, it turned out that Cawthon donated to a lot of politicians who are pretty anti-LGBTQ. Mitch McConnell, Tulsi Gabbard, Donald Trump. Yeah. Scott Cawthon went to Reddit to give his full statement, and I'm not gonna read all of it here because it's long, but basically he says that he loves his LGBTQ fans, but he won't apologize for exercising his right and his duty to vote for and support the candidates who he felt could best run the country. He goes into detail into why he chose to support the candidates he did. He says he treats everyone equally, and then he ends his statement with this. I'm a Republican. I'm a Christian. I'm pro-life. I believe in God. I also believe in equality, and in science, and in common sense. Despite what some may say, all those things can go together. That's not an apology or a promise to change, it's the way it's always been. If I get canceled, then I get canceled. I don't do this for the money anymore. I do it because I enjoy it. If people think I'm doing more harm than good now, then maybe it's better that I get canceled and retire. I would accept that. I've had a fulfilling career. Besides, most things that people could take from you are things that never had much value to begin with. I have always loved and will continue to love this community and this fan base, even if someday it doesn't include me anymore. And then not long after, he officially announced his retirement on his website, not bringing up the controversy, aside from stating that the LGBTQ community has been very supportive of him, but instead saying he's just getting older and misses his old hobbies and doing stuff for his kids. So all in all, this is one of the more graceful cancelings I've witnessed. I mean, I guess you could call it that. Like, he just kind of looked at the situation, said, I'm too old for this, and then bowed out. And I guess I kind of respect that, despite the fact that this completely ruins the franchise for me now. But not in the way you would probably think. Let's backtrack here and talk about the canceling itself for a minute. I do want to make it clear that there's nothing inherently scummy about looking up someone's campaign donations. While there is evidence to suggest that the person who did this was just doing it for the lulz, and it sucks that all of this happened because of a joke, their right to do it is actually protected by law. According to the Federal Election Campaign Act, all campaign donations above $200 must be made public record. This is in place to prevent corruption and also to ensure that no one organization or corporation is funding a candidate. This has been a thing since the 70s. The FEC website has an interactive timeline if you want more information. So no one hacked into Scott Cawthon's personal finances. This is just information that is freely available on the internet. That being said, the guy did go through some shit after people found out about this. He was apparently doxxed, his family threatened, which caused a lot of stress and panic to his pregnant wife. This is wrong. Please do not dox and threaten people. Holy shit. I am 100% taking Scott Cawthon's side on that. It's disgusting that he and his family had to go through that. However, as you often see in situations where people take disagreements with a creator way too far, the people who have real criticisms tend to be lumped in with them and tend to be dismissed on the grounds that they're all bullies and harassers. And I want to talk about this because I have talked about Five Nights at Freddy's and its creator before, and I have some issues with that video that I do feel like probably should be addressed. First of all, I feel terrible about the way I took another creator's point about jump scares, and, well, I did credit them in the description. But the thing is, the creator, formerly known as Jordan Underneath, had at that point taken down all their videos and didn't want their face on the internet anymore. I am sure I could have found a re-upload of their content somewhere if I looked, but out of respect respect for them, I decided I wasn't going to include any of their video. And I stand by that decision. I am not doing that here either. The problem is, I didn't mention that the idea I was sharing originally came from someone else in the actual video. You do know you can get through the entire game without getting jump scared, right? They aren't littered throughout the entire game. They only happen when you die. I didn't know what to do since they weren't going by the name Jordan Underneath anymore, and they didn't even want to be associated with that content. I was trying to be respectful to their wishes, but looking back, one thing I could have done was say, oh, there was this creator, all their content is gone now, but here's what they said and why I agree with it. Or I could have found a re-upload, found the exact words that they said, and read them out like a quote. There were better options than to just say basically what they said and not acknowledge that it wasn't originally my idea anywhere outside the description, and I am very sorry for that. I also stole some game footage in the video. Most of it I credited, but some of it I did not. If I could find where I got it from, I'll stick the links to those in the description. But the thing I want to mostly go over is the way I talked about Scott Cawthon, because it all feels a little bit dated now. Now, I threw plenty of criticism at Scott Cawthon, but I also threw a lot of praise at him and defended him for the things that he was being criticized for at the time, mainly that he was milking the series. And for the most part, I stand by this. Like, yeah, you know, he had kids to feed, and like, this was the first taste of success he ever had in this field.
I was just trying to, make a bunch of little games to kind of, help support my family. At the time, I think I was making, slot machine games and just, anything would bring in an extra, $40 or $50 a month.
I get it. But I admit, I was a little shocked when I was reading the interview quotes where he was describing the creation of Five Nights at Freddy's and just how religious he was. And that's something I've seen get brought up a lot through this whole cancellation. Why are any of you surprised? He's been very open about his religious beliefs before this. But perhaps that's not fair. Like, honestly, I do not give any kind of a shit what his religious beliefs are. If he finds fulfillment in his faith, then I am genuinely very happy for him. And Christians aren't a monolith anyways. You can't really accurately gauge someone's political beliefs from their religion. But Cawthon's religion is an important part of his career. Before the success of Five Nights at Freddy's, he basically only made family-friendly Christian games, which is hilarious and strange, considering that what he's now known for are his jump-scared child murder simulators. Oh god, did that kid just get stabbed? That's also something I've seen people bring up, that it's delightfully ironic that a guy who so proudly announces himself to be pro-life has made an entire career out of a video game series in which dozens of children are murdered. And while I agree, it is pretty funny, it doesn't really hold up if you're genuinely trying to call him a hypocrite. I mean, this is a horror game. You're supposed to find the murder of the children in the story horrifying, and the terrible twisted fates they found themselves in through no fault of their own tragic, while the person who took their tiny lives too soon is the villain who is sent to hell to be tortured for all eternity. The fire within me burns eternal, and now you shall as well. A pro-life person could absolutely write that story. And this isn't me saying that Scott Cawthon wrote Five Nights at Freddy's to have a pro-life message, because no, I do not believe that at all. I just think if you really wanted to read that message in there for whatever fucking reason, there is more than enough to go off of. But there is one really weird part of Scott Cawthon proudly identifying as pro-life that is kind of worth going over, I think. The pro-life coffee pot game, or more accurately, Scott's reaction to other people's reactions to the pro-life coffee pot game. Okay, this needs some explanation. In 2012, 2 years before Five Nights at Freddy's was ever created, Scott Cawthon released a game called The Desolate Hope, the sequel to one of his previous games called The Desolate Room. I have never played this game because I don't want to, but it's supposedly about a little coffee pot exploring a derelict space station, and that the coffee pot comes across an abandoned fetus and rescues it. Shortly after the game's release, the website Gaming Symmetry did a review of it, which was mostly positive. However, the reviewer notes at the very end, I feel that the ending, which I can understand is the result of the designer's personal opinion, comes off as out of place for the game's setting, unnecessary towards pushing the game's overall narrative, and frankly, leaves me with an overall negative impression of the motivations behind the game's existence. As a matter of disclosure, I feel I should note that there is a message at the end of the game, one that not everyone is going to agree with. Cawthon then actually responded to this review with a message he also posted on a gaming forum that had similar criticisms, revealing that the message read, "This game is dedicated to the children who never saw childhood." So yes, take that with the context of the little coffee pot saving a fetus, pro-life coffee pot game. And no, I couldn't have just gone into the game and checked for myself, or else found a playthrough that showed exactly what the dedication said, because Scott Cawthon removed the dedication way back in 2012. Now, in my original video, I framed this as Scott accepting and learning from criticism, and I pointed out that this was several years before FNAF even existed, so he probably wasn't trying to cover his ass by getting rid of something controversial.
And this was 2 years before FNAF came out, so he wasn't covering his ass because suddenly people were paying attention to him.
However, I never really got into what was really being said in this comment, and I'd like to now. So, here's some warnings. No, seriously. And here's what Scott Cawthon said about the message. Concerning the dedication at the end of the game reading, "This game is dedicated to the children who never saw childhood," I would encourage everyone to read it to be exactly what it says and nothing more. That statement isn't a political view on abortion. And then he goes into an uncomfortable amount of detail describing a bunch of women he knows who lost children either by miscarriage or tragic accident, and I don't feel comfortable reading that out loud. Read it on screen if you want. Up to you. But then he continues, "With those children in mind, I absolutely dedicate my game to the children who never saw childhood, because they die from hunger, from natural causes, from unnatural causes, from accidents, and from unknown reasons, every day. Everyone reading this forum has lived a full life already compared to the millions who barely taste it." So, okay. Dedicating his game to all the children who have ever died is kinda weird, but he's obviously seen a lot of grief and suffering from women who lost children, and I could see how he could be moved from those experiences. Granted, I'd probably feel really weird if I suffered a miscarriage and it inspired my friend to make a game in which a coffee pot rescues a fetus, but I guess I could see how that might be a nice gesture. I don't know. He goes on to say he removed the dedication so no one thinks he was trying to stick a political message in there, which, alright. He wanted to make an apolitical game, realized people were reading a political message into it that he was not intending, and made the necessary adjustments as to not stir up unnecessary drama. And while the listing of his friend's traumas was extremely unnecessary, saying that he was taking something out so it wouldn't be misinterpreted is totally fine and valid. But then he keeps going. I'm gonna read these next 2 paragraphs in full, so buckle your seatbelts. And concerning the message of the game, it was about choice. It wasn't about abortion rights or stem cell research or anything like that. It was about the power behind taking something small and insignificant by any standards, something that has no right to exist and wouldn't exist, and then someone choosing to give it importance and give it meaning. The baby in my story is similar. It's implied as being not completely natural, probably grown from a test tube for the purpose of research, and had no right on its own to exist, and certainly not to expect a childhood or a normal life. But the game is about the power of a choice to give that, against all odds and expectations, a life to something that wouldn't have had it otherwise. That is something powerful and beautiful. It's the same when someone chooses to adopt a child. You are giving a childhood to someone who wouldn't have had it otherwise. Is that principle all about abortion? No. Could it apply to abortion? Of course it can. Let's say that a woman is pregnant. Maybe she doesn't want to be. Maybe it's a product of rape. Whatever the circumstances are, they're bad, and no one would blame her for aborting that pregnancy. But now imagine if, of her own free will, going against everyone and everything around her, she chooses to keep it. Then imagine that she even died in childbirth for that baby as a result of that choice. As appalling as that example is, if a mother made that choice, would you accuse her of hate or of love? That is pro-choice. That is literally pro-choice. I mean, he writes an entire paragraph about how important choice is, and then uses 2 examples in which a woman wants to terminate her pregnancy and one in which she doesn't, claiming the experiences and reasonings for her decisions are both valid. That is literally the definition of pro-choice right there. Granted, this whole thing does give me the vibe that he would prefer the woman keep the baby and almost kind of glorifies a woman dying in childbirth, which is not great. But being pro-choice doesn't mean that you believe abortion is always the answer, that every single unwanted or unexpected pregnancy should always be terminated. Literally all it means is that pregnant people should have the right to do what they feel is right for them, and that is what he is expressing here. Now, obviously, I didn't feel like it was appropriate to dig into a man's political views on abortion in a lighthearted video about a children's jump scare game, but do you understand why, when I saw that Scott Cawthon just out and said, "I'm pro-life," I felt a wave of confused disappointment? This is the same guy who wrote, "Whatever the circumstances are, they're bad, and no one would blame her for aborting the pregnancy," which is absolutely not something I'd ever expect a pro-life person to say. So was I wrong? Was he trying to cover his ass? He wasn't well known at this point, but I'm sure the last thing an up-and-coming indie developer needs is a scandal over a controversial political topic. The sheer length of his response does kind of seem like he's overcompensating and trying to convince someone that his intentions were completely innocent, but even if there was a message in there, it was actually about choice, so you read it completely wrong. And maybe now that he's well established, he's confident in stating his true political beliefs. Actually, while I was in the process of editing this video, I decided to poke around a little bit more, and I discovered this comment from Scott Cawthon on a thread about the message in A Desolate Hope, in which he says, "I regret taking this message screen out of the game. At the time, I was desperate for people to like my games and play them, and I caved into a handful of people complaining about a message that they perceived as somehow offensive. I should have left it there. There was nothing wrong with it." So yeah, 2019 Grace was just straight up wrong. So, alright, there's the background, but now the question remains, is it really valid to cancel someone for their political beliefs, especially when they never expressly shared them to the world? Like, that is an important aspect of this. Scott Cawthon wasn't running around on Twitter saying slurs or claiming that the election was stolen or anything like that. He never talked about politics at all. This was all stuff that was dug up, completely legally, mind you. Like I said, it's easy to find information, but even so, he never willingly advertised any of this. They were quiet donations he never told anyone about. And yes, he is certainly allowed to support anyone he chooses. He's allowed to vote any way he chooses. But him announcing his love for the LGBTQ community, while in the same breath defending supporting candidates who hurt the LGBTQ community, comes off as a bit shitty. I mean, I could say I love my cousin Joanna with all my heart, but if I'm actively giving money to someone to punch her in the face every week, then what good is my word? There's this prevailing attitude that in order for someone to be racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, transphobic, etc., you have to be an out-and-out bigot. You have to refuse to associate with those groups, you have to be yelling slurs at them and actively trying to run them out of your community. But in reality, most of the harm that comes to marginalized groups comes from politicians who pass laws to make their lives harder, of which most of the candidates Cawthon donated to have done. In 2007, Cory Gardner voted against gay marriage in Colorado, which he also doubled down on in 2014. In 2020, Tulsi Gabbard introduced a bill that would have made it illegal for trans women and girls to participate in sports, which, granted, this was after Cawthon donated to her, but he could have brought it up in his statement if it made him regret his donation. In 2019, Ben Carson and Donald Trump tried to make a rule that trans women couldn't use federally funded women's shelters, and Donald Trump has banned trans people from the military, made it legal for healthcare workers to discriminate against trans people, tried to make it legal for gay and trans people to get fired for being gay and trans, ran on the platform that he would appoint Supreme Court justices that would get rid of gay marriage.
But a majority of Americans now support the idea of gay marriage. Wouldn't it be divisive to try to overcome it?
It has really been determined, and we will see what happens. We're going to look at judges. They've got to be great judges. They've got to be conservative judges. We're going to see how they stand, depending on what their views are. But that would be my preference.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Where do you want them to stand?
I would prefer that they stand against, but we'll see what happens. It depends on the judge.
But just to button this up very quickly, sir, are you saying that if you become president, you might try to appoint justices to overrule the decision on same-sex marriage?
I would strongly consider that, yes.
Something that pretty much did happen, by the way. I mean, we still have gay marriage, but he and Mitch McConnell pushed through a good number of Supreme Court nominees who opposed gay marriage. And Scott Cawthon donated to Mitch McConnell too. Oddly enough, despite him giving Mitch McConnell the most amount of money, he did not write up an excuse as to why he supported Mitch McConnell's campaign. I wonder why. But I do think the community as a whole has gotten a bit hung up on the LGBTQ aspect of these candidates, which is completely understandable. Trans rights is a hot button issue right now, and the FNAF fandom is completely overrun by gay furries, but these candidates have gone after other groups too, particularly POC. McConnell said he opposes the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, a bill that is literally designed to make it so states can't put in place laws that make it harder for Black and other POC to vote. And Donald Trump, well, we all know about Donald Trump. In fact, when defending his choice to support Trump in 2020, Cawthon said, "I felt he was the best man to fuel a strong economy and stand up to America's enemies abroad, of which there are many." I wonder which enemies Trump has rallied against.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. Build that wall. Build that wall.
Perhaps I'm putting the most bad faith argument I can into Scott Cawthon's mouth, but even outside the wall thing, we have the Muslim ban.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
And Trump insisting on calling COVID-19 the Chinese virus.
Why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this?
Because it comes from China. As you know, China tried to say at one point, maybe they stopped now, that it was caused by American soldiers. That can't happen. It's not going to happen. Not as long as I'm president. It comes from China.
None of these things are okay. They are all steeped in deep prejudice and actively caused fear and harm against people in this country who belong to those groups. Now, is this to say that Scott Cawthon is definitely a racist, or a homophobe, or a transphobe? No. I don't know the man. I don't know what's in his heart. But it's also completely 100% understandable why people in the communities these politicians have targeted would be upset about Cawthon donating to their campaigns, despite the horrible things they've done being very public and well known. And I see a lot of people defending Scott Cawthon saying, "Oh, you're so focused on his political donations, but what about all the money he gives to charity?" And yeah, he is really good about that. Like, at this point, I'm confident in saying he's probably given over $1 million of his own money to St. Jude's, a children's hospital that does not charge the families of the patients, among many, many other charities as well. Which is incredible. I am not going to deny that. It is absolutely amazing that he gives so much away to charity. And at the time of me writing this, Daco, a YouTuber who predominantly plays FNAF, is planning on hosting a live stream to raise money for the Trevor Project, a non-profit organization that supports LGBTQ youth. And Scott Cawthon responded to a Reddit post about this stream saying he was going to be there.
Anonymous has just donated $50,000. If it is Scott, I'm pretty sure it is. Thank you so much for that massive donation for Trevor Project. I really do appreciate it, and Trevor Project do.
Based off of the deleted comments right underneath, I would assume he was criticized for this. You know, that He's just trying to save face since this was right after he was blasted for supporting homophobic candidates. And maybe? But Daco has been planning the stream since the start of June, and Cawthon does often pop into his charity streams.
I can't believe you just donated 99999 and then donate $1 to get it to 100k. Freaking 10k! What the heck?
So it might just be bad timing. Whether or not that is the case, though, I think the part that bothers me about this is, well, wouldn't the Trevor Project's goal to protect LGBTQ youth be easier if the government wasn't full of people actively stripping away protections for the LGBTQ community? Or even St. Jude's, for that matter. Wouldn't St. Jude's goal to give free healthcare to children be completely solved if we had politicians that would actually do something about our broken healthcare system? A healthcare system Scott Cawthon himself is a victim of. In a 2014 interview with Geeks Under Grace, Cawthon revealed that he had been kicked off his life insurance policy after the insurance company found out that he had mentioned suicidal thoughts to his doctor. It was at that point I realized that not only did my life have no value, but now even my death had no value. See, it was little snippets like this that let me give him the benefit of the doubt while I was making the original video, because surely, after going through something like that, he wouldn't support politicians who were actively trying to take away insurance from thousands of Americans. That, along with the actual content of his games, like his horror games, not the pro-life coffee pot game. The FNAF franchise has been slowly getting more and more female-centric over the years, with some characters even being retconned into girls.
I recognize you.
My daughter.
And there even being characters who use both he, him, and she, her pronouns. Like together, I mean, like they're like gender fluid. And not to mention all the satire contained within the franchise. Because yes, there is satire in Five Nights at Freddy's. The entire joke of the franchise is that the reason everything was even happening in the first place was because Freddy Fazbear's was run by a corrupt corporation who kept covering up the murders in their restaurants to protect their bottom line, essentially letting a child murderer run loose, causing the deaths of countless children, which in turn led to the deaths of countless employees as the dead children started possessing animatronics because the company didn't dispose of the clearly gross and rotting robots.
There may be times when you purchase something of questionable quality, and we don't blame you. Cutting corners is just good business.
And more than just letting people die, the corporations also stole wages from their employees.
Now that your elevator experience has been customized to your needs and you're thoroughly relaxed, it's worth mentioning that due to your lackluster performance yesterday, your pay has been decreased by a substantial amount.
And screwed them over by giving them meaningless gift baskets instead of, like, benefits.
You've earned your 1-week bonus, which will be given to you in the form of a delightful gift basket, the cost of which will be taken out of your next paycheck.
This is such a major part of the franchise. It's literally mentioned in Night 1 of the first game.
Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for damage to property or person. Upon discovering that damage or death has occurred, a missing person report will be filed within 90 days or as soon as property and premises have been thoroughly cleaned and bleached and the carpets have been replaced. Blah, blah, blah.
The corporate structure of the restaurant is considered almost a villainous presence in and of itself.
Sure, it's a lot of money to invest, but everyone's doing it. And that means it's safe and lucrative.
So it was really quite disappointing when it turned out that Scott Cawthon supported the campaign of a corrupt businessman because he thought he'd be the best man to fuel a strong economy. I guess the important takeaway here is, despite the fact that I thought I had a grasp on who Scott Cawthon was as a person based on his statements and the content of his work, I obviously didn't. Now, the idea of a parasocial relationship is not a new thing, but in case you've never heard of it, it's basically a relationship that is completely one-sided, in that one person loves and admires another person, but the other person doesn't even know they exist.
I love you! No, you fucking don't.
The term was invented to describe the relationship people have with celebrities, but nowadays it's used to describe the relationship people have with YouTubers,
hello everybody,
content creators, artists, etc.
Stop participating.
And Scott Cawthon was somewhat of an elusive figure. Like, seriously, for the longest time, his business model was radio silence for months, and then, oh, by the way, new game coming out tomorrow. But still, he showed up in charity streams, he had a somewhat trollless persona.
This is the mature version of Sister Location. The real version won't be coming out for another 2 months, so here it is. This is a preview of it.
Okay, so the new... Yeah, cool.
Wait,
alright.
Are you kidding me? Are you effing kidding me?
Oh, it was a troll?
But overall came off as just extremely laid back, and that he cared about his fans, and that he truly loved making games. And the community loved him back. Hell, pretty much everyone in the community is on a first-name basis with him. Something my sister suspects Game Theory might have popularized, because he was calling Scott Cawthon out by name as early as his third video.
Scott, seriously? Seriously, Scott?
But honestly, who knows? And it is worth noting that this isn't the only controversy Cawthon has been in, and each time it was chalked up to either accident or ignorance, and he quickly apologized and fixed the problem. So for a lot of people, Scott Cawthon was like a cool, kind of distant friend who pranked you sometimes, but it was all in good fun, and he was generally really nice and friendly and always was trying to do the right thing. So this coming out made a lot of people upset. It made them feel like their friend had lied about supporting them. And while some people jumped right into defending their friend, other people lashed out at the person who they felt betrayed them. And whether or not that is justified is entirely up to you. I know there are people who don't think it's a big deal, who think that the fact that he's donated more to charity than politicians negates this entire thing. And if that's your stance, fine. Like I said, he made the donations privately, he never advertised his politics. It's a very easy thing to ignore. But for other people, knowing where Scott Cawthon stands taints the entire franchise for them, and that is also extremely understandable. There's probably a comparison to be made here against Minecraft and its creator, Notch, who also ended up having some less than savory political views, and as such has been pretty much erased from every aspect of the game after selling it to Microsoft. However, Minecraft is a sandbox game for building and crafting. There's nothing really identifying about Notch in the actual gameplay, but Cawthon is deeply ingrained within the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. He's a boss fight in FNAF World. His photo appears in the VR game.
Many of them were total fabrications from the mind of a complete lunatic. Lawsuits pending.
His voice is literally the tutorial in the first 2 games.
I wanted to record a message for you to help you get settled in on your first night. I'm here to talk you through some of the things you can expect to see during your first week here.
And appears in several other ones.
Hello. Hey, you're doing great. Hello.
Kind of.
Hello.
Hey, Scott.
Hello. Welcome to your new career.
Hey, Scott.
And part of this is because this franchise is Scott's baby. He was the only one who worked on the first 4 games. 5, actually, if you include FNAF World. And even after other people got on board and started working on projects with Scott, whether they be voice actors or entire teams of developers, he still retained almost full control. And that was what kind of made the franchise special. I know in my original video I compared FNAF to It, but I think a more apt comparison is Saw, if you ignore the gore element at least. It had humble beginnings, it was creative and kind of interesting for its time, it was pretty straightforward, but there were a few hidden twists in there. But then more and more got made in a short period of time, and now nobody really goes to see Saw for the scares anymore. It's all about the lore, the convoluted timeline, and just seeing what ridiculous twist will happen next. Now imagine if the story of Saw was written by just one guy. That's what Five Nights at Freddy's is. Everything, from the pile of dead children that gets bigger and bigger with every game, to the robot scooping out a man's insides to take over his body, only to abandon it when his body starts to rot, and then he just kind of like gets up and continues to live his life. Or the game where you're playing in hell, or the game where a rainbow mocks and demeans you.
Wow, what a moron!
It all came from the imagination of Scott Cawthon. And that is the part that I unironically loved about Five Nights at Freddy's, that it's the passion project of one guy who pumps the gas more and more of every iteration, who pours every ounce of imagination he has into crafting a crazier and crazier narrative that he just tosses out into the world like an old man at the park throwing breadcrumbs at the ducks. And the fact that this one guy took a $5 indie game on Steam and turned it into a franchise so huge that it has 2 entire series of books written about it, a AAA game coming out this year, and a movie coming out in the future, that's amazing. And it's been fascinating to watch all this unfurl over the past 7 years. But that's over now. Scott retired, and perhaps it's for the best. If his statement is to be believed, he was more than ready to leave and be with his family, and there is, of course, the attempt to try to salvage the brand. But how is this gonna work now, since the entire appeal of the games is the lore that the one guy has been writing by himself for 7 years? What's gonna happen when someone new tries to take over writing the lore? I mean, game theory loves to point out details from the first few games to show that Scott Cawthon has had the weirdest plot points from the newer games planned out from the beginning.
How we're pretty confident that Golden Freddy was possessed by 2 spirits, Crying Child and Cassidy the Vengeful Spirit? Well, it seems like Scott may have been hinting at that since FNAF 3.
And they also have this sort of back and forth with Scott Cawthon. It's mostly one-sided, but sometimes Cawthon responds, where they're like ruining each other's lives and all that.
Answer me! I don't know. That's exactly what I worried might go wrong. No!
Like, for real, how confident must you be that you and the game developer who you're making videos on are on such good terms that you feel like it's perfectly fine to make jokes about literally torturing them? Also, implying that the game creator doesn't know his own lore is a choice. If that were any other game developer, I think that would have been perceived differently. But since it's Scott Cawthon, who's cool and goes along with MatPat's ribbing, it's perfectly fine and in some ways kind of expected. But are they going to be able to do that anymore? Are lore videos going to be split into Scott lore and after Scott lore? And what about the stuff that's still in development? Security Breach is almost out. Despite Cawthon removing himself from his projects, I'm sure he was heavily involved in it. So it's in this awkward spot where people who want him gone completely are still going to be playing a Scott Cawthon game, but the people who want his involvement and to specifically analyze his contributions to the lore aren't going to know what he did and didn't do. And what about the movie? The damn thing's been in production for 6 years. Scott Cawthon has been writing and rewriting the script over and over and over again.
And, you know, one of the biggest challenges, and I've written 3 scripts on my own.
And back in the original video, I said I couldn't wait to see the end product because even if it's bad, even if it's stupid and not scary, it will have something pretty much every other video game adaptation in existence doesn't. Someone behind the scenes who loves and cares about it. But is that even true anymore? Is the Five Nights at Freddy's movie just going to end up being churned out and spat out into the world so everyone can collect their paychecks and go? Including Scott Cawthon, technically. While at this time we don't know for sure if he's retaining the rights to Five Nights at Freddy's, it is kind of looking that way, with him saying he's going to handpick the person to take over the development of the games, and that he's still going to be sticking around, even if it's not to the capacity he was before. So he's still going to be profiting off the franchise, he's just not going to have any involvement in the actual creation. And on one hand, I think he should keep the rights. He created this franchise almost completely alone, and he deserves at least that. But on the other hand, people who don't want to support him anymore are still going to be throwing their money at him, even if they don't know it. And some part of me feels like this is the worst way this could have turned out. I mean, I was 100% planning on seeing the FNAF movie when it comes out, but I don't even think I want to see the damn thing anymore, because not only does it no longer have the backing of someone who loved it and genuinely wanted to see it succeed, but there's also a chance the money I spend to see it is going to end up in the Trump 20 2024 campaign, which I know is a ridiculous complaint, because literally every time you see a mainstream Hollywood movie, you're probably giving your money to the worst scumbags on earth. Like, I disagree with Scott Cawthon on pretty much all of his politics, but there are way worse people in the movie industry alone. And, like, I just bought something on Amazon and, like, you know how they are. Maybe I also have a sense of betrayal in all this, but God, I don't know. I have so many weird and conflicting feelings about this whole thing, and I don't know how I would have felt if Cawthon decided to stay on the franchise, but as of right now, my original tweet sums it up. I'm disappointed. This whole thing is disappointing, and it sucks to see something I defended so vehemently potentially collapse in on itself in just a few days. But it might not be the end. The FNAF franchise post Scott Cawthon might be good, who knows? But I don't know if I'll still be around to see it. I guess we'll see how I feel when the time comes, along with the rest of the fanbase too. It's going to be a rough adjustment, but what's done is done, and whatever is going to happen is going to happen.